Over this past weekend, Today and TOR published an email interview they conducted with Caitlin Sullivan Kelly, Star Wars The Old Republic's lead writer, and Ashley Rule, the game's narrative director. These questions come from Today and TOR's Discord, and unsurprisingly, given the interviewees, they mostly surround the game's main story and lore. So let's dive in and check it out. The first question asks if SWTOR's writing strategy is plot-driven or character-driven. To illustrate what they're asking, they give the example of Darth Malgus, whether the writers brought him back knowing where they wanted his story to go and how it was going to get there, or if they just knew they wanted to bring him back and would let him get to wherever he would go through whatever means seemed natural. Ashley answers by saying technically their writing strategy is driven by the player's story. She says a high-level goal is always to create a compelling story that weaves in the player's perspective and choices into their unique Star Wars fantasy. When we look at creating a brand new story, we start by identifying the larger themes that we want to present to the player. From there, we identify characters that make sense to tie into that theme, and then get into the nitty-gritty of those characters' personal journeys. Caitlin adds, the way I always describe our writing process is that the narrative team uses guideposts that we weave the plot around. The guideposts, in the context of writing any story for SWTOR, are always focused around characters, what they want, how they feel. In the case of players, we're constantly considering the choices they might make and emotions they might experience. Making sure that all these themes are well presented is the goal we strive for when writing the main story, and the events we choose to happen in the plot are how we execute and achieve that goal. So it's good to know that they're striving to take in the player's perspective, but I have to say that in recent updates, I don't think they've been very successful at that. The story is felt very much like someone else's, whether it's Shay's or Sahar's, and our characters have basically been the sidekick. Whether it's a lack of resources or something else, our characters just don't seem to be the main characters anymore. Which leads me neatly to the next question, which involves writing the story from the player character's perspective. The question says that while they tend to do this very well, can they recall any time where you were way off the mark and were surprised by something players wanted to do in a scene but weren't able to? Caitlin says no, she can't think of any times like that, but she does say that it speaks well to their character-driven plots that so many of the characters they introduce, players want to either recruit or romance, and that while they can allow people to kill off the characters they don't like, it's not possible for them to provide players with the opportunity to interact with, build friendships and relationships with a lot of the characters that they might want to. Ashley says that she is both surprised and not surprised that so many people want to romance Malgus. These answers kinda surprised me. If we take Caitlin and Ashley at their word, and we will, then we can say they really don't seem to realize that people aren't enjoying the story that we've been getting lately. I'm not going to say that's universal because it isn't, but there has been a lot of discussion, whether that's on the SWTOR forums or Reddit, and I'm sure on these Discords and Twitter as well, about people wanting to move on from the Mandalorians and just in general finding the story a little boring and a little draggy. Not that I expected them to trash their story or anything, it just seems interesting to me that Caitlin can't think of anything that hasn't resonated with the players, and when Ashley thinks of something, she thinks of not being able to romance Malgus. But we'll move on to question number 3, which is about introducing new characters. The person wants to know how the team balances giving attention to known fan favorites with introducing new characters to keep things fresh. Caitlin says they're lucky to have such a large catalog of SWTOR stories to revisit, that regardless of the theme, the odds are astronomical that there's already a character who will fit into it. As examples, she gives Talos Strelick returning as an archaeology expert in digging deeper, Sana Ray as a liaison with the boss, and Nakavi and possibly Torian joining the fight against Teta Cole. Ashley adds that when they are going to add a new character, it's usually because they want to explore a new conflict or a new idea. As example, she gives Colonel Gallo from the Legacy of the Sith expansion, as she can represent the struggle of the Selkath who are caught between the Empire and the Republic, or Commander Cord and Darth Norok, who demonstrate the complicated relationship between the Imperial military and the Sith. She goes on to say that giving a face to the conflict or idea helps us as viewers connect with them more personally, and these new ideas provide our established characters with opportunities for character growth. The next person wants to know what year it is in-game. They say, does SWTOR still consider one day in real life equal to one day in universe as told by Charles Boyd, or are the events of Legacy of the Sith from Elam to now only weeks or months apart? Caitlin says they've abandoned the concept that time passes at the same rate both in-game and in real life. She says that she plans to make a forum post detailing the timeline of Legacy of the Sith, but that the story beats in this particular expansion happen only weeks or months apart. And 7.6, when it releases, will take place at the end of 27 ATC or 3626 BBY. The next person wants to know about those cinematic cutaways. They say, what is the motivation for the cinematic cutaways in the main story? And they're talking about those scenes where our character isn't present, like the scenes between Valen and Arkin, or those scenes between Rakan and Zahar. Ashley says these scenes are a great way to build character outside of the player's story, and they can make the galaxy feel bigger. But, she says, these scenes need to be used carefully to respect the player's experience of the story. If something important to the plot is revealed to the player in a cutaway, but their character isn't present, we need to build in a scene where the character learns that information, effectively making the scene twice. It's also hard to create moments of surprise for the player character if the player is like, yeah, I already knew that. So the challenge becomes, if the player knows this, but we need the character to know it, how and when do we reconcile this imbalance of information? When and where to add a cutaway scene really comes down to a matter of narrative perspective. Caitlin adds that these cutaway scenes are a storytelling tool that aids their character-driven narrative, like making sure all characters, allies, and enemies alike are well-rounded. She says this is best done by showing the player these characters' beliefs and motivations, rather than simply telling them what they are. She says scenes like the ones between Arkin and Valen and Zahar and Rakan are good examples of scenes where the player character doesn't need to be privy to that information, but it helps the player empathize, understand, or even hate these characters by letting them see how these characters interact with other people in their lives. I don't disagree with this at all. It makes perfect sense. My only problem is that, considering the lack of resources that the studio seems to have right now, I think I would prefer to have my character voiced rather than have a lot of scenes with Zahar and Rakan while our PCs are stuck in KOTOR-style dialogue. This next question is an interesting one for lore nerds. The person wants to know, what is the state of the Jedi Council and the Dark Council at this point in time, and who are their members? Caitlin fields this one. She says, the Jedi Council isn't the body of leadership we knew before the invasion of the Eternal Empire. Instead, it's more an amalgamation of seasoned and highly respected Jedi Masters who are active participants in Task Force Nova's objective to restore the Jedi Order to its former glory. We also see that these Jedi are more entwined with various Republic leaders and their interests. Members of this new council include former Grandmaster Steel Shan, current acting Grandmaster Nos Dural, Master Saldarin, and Master Vinur Tesh. The appearance of some of these characters depend on the player's choices. For example, if someone is playing an Imperial class, Nos Dural might not even be alive. Additionally, if someone is playing a Jedi, they could be a contributor to this body of Jedi leaders themselves, while mostly focusing on the needs of their alliance, of course. To which I say, boo. And the same rule applies to the makeup of the Dark Council, however things get a bit more chaotic, mostly because of player choices. The Empire is either ruled by Empress Asina or Emperor Valron. The mainstays of the Dark Council are Darth Krovos, at the head of Sphere of Military Strategy, Darth Zarian, as the preeminent leader of the Sphere of Galactic Influence, and Darth Rivix, as the liaison between the Dark Council and the Alliance, for players with Imperial characters, of course. Seats affected by player choice get a little trickier, however. The head of the Sphere of Sith Doctrine is Darth Anethel, unless you're a Sith Inquisitor whose desire for power led you to take that seat for yourself. Darth Sabak leads the Sphere of Scientific Advancement, unless she was killed on Onderon. The Sphere of Civil Administration could potentially be led by Darth Valron, if he's alive and isn't the Emperor, Darth Shar, again if she's alive, or Darth Norok, if he's alive, and so on and so forth. So it looks like we might have confirmation that the PC Inquisitor actually is on the Dark Council once again if they chose to kill Anethel, and a surprise, I didn't quite realize that Darth Rivix was also a member of the council. So some good new information here. And the next question is about Syl. They say, can we expect any references or upcoming content regarding Syl in the future? In case you don't remember, Syl was a Jedi Padawan. She was one of Satil Shan's students who was killed on the ship that we raided at the end of Echoes of Oblivion when we were taking on Valkorion, Tenebrae, and Vishit for the last time. We see Valen paying some undue attention to this girl. Then, in the end, we see Syl alive and well coming in to see Satil. This has led many people to believe that Valen has taken over Syl's body and is once again among the living. Both Ashley and Caitlin say they haven't forgotten about her and they still plan on using her. I can't say I'm excited to see Valen back, but I'm sure there are a lot of people who would disagree with me. So, yay for them, I guess. And finally, someone wants to know how free the team are to bring concepts from other Star Wars media into the game. Ashley tackles this one. She says, the high-level questions we ask when adding content from other Star Wars properties is 1. Do these additions help players live out their Star Wars fantasy? And 2. Are they compatible with the world, story, and lore we already have in the game? We work closely with our partners at Lucasfilm Games to make sure that what we're bringing to SWTOR fits within our world and game, particularly in story content. And ultimately, we want to create the best place for players to live out their favorite Star Wars fantasy, and including concepts from other Star Wars media is a big part of that. And there you have it. We got some interesting answers there, and I will leave a link to this interview so that you can read it for yourself. But let us know what you think in the comments, and if you like this video, why not like and subscribe for more content like this. As always, thanks for watching.